Hi, I'm Jeffrey Pickette. Welcome to this special edition of Stoughton Spotlight, Conversations with the Candidates, where I'll be interviewing the candidates running for Selectman and School Committee in the 2016 town election in Stoughton. On this episode, I'm joined by Anita Hill, who is a candidate for School Committee. Anita, welcome and thank you for coming.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Welcome, and thank you for having me.
And let's get started with just an introduction. Tell us a little bit about yourself and introduce yourselves to the viewers out there.
Sure. There's not a lot to tell. Typical move to Stoughton about 20 years ago, my husband and I, with our 5-year-old son, Christopher, and 3 months later, my daughter was born. My son started in kindergarten at South School. My daughter, when she was old enough, also went through South School. They both have gone through both public schools, graduated high school. My son went on to Northeastern University and graduated with a doctorate in pharmacy. I'm very proud of him. He is practicing pharmacy at the VA hospital in Manchester, New Hampshire. My daughter graduated in 2014, and she's currently at Bridgewater State University, a sophomore, majoring in exercise physiology, and she wants to get her doctorate also in physical therapy. So we have a long way to go yet. Along the way, I became involved in the schools. Obviously, most people start with a parent-teachers organization, which I did. At South School, I walked into my first parent-teacher meeting and walked out as the president of the PTO. That's not the normal way it happens, but I just jumped in with 2 feet. They needed help, and that's how I started. This year after that, I became a town meeting member. I've been a town meeting member for about 16 years now. Last year, the circumstances that came up with a resignation on the school committee, and the Board of Selectmen and school committee were taking applications for that position, for the interim part of that position, so I applied. And there were 3 other people at the time, and it was a joint hearing with the Board of Selectmen and the school committee, and they interviewed us and they picked me. So October 6th, I joined the school committee, and now I need to run for that position that's opened up in April.
Oh, perfect, perfect summary. I don't have to explain that now, so thank you. That was well done. But as you mentioned, you've been on the board for about 4 or 5,
right.
5 months now, and so a little bit of a taste. Mm-hmm. So what's been your first experiences on the board in this interim position?
Well, like I said, I try to hit the ground running with whatever I do. I go in both feet and start running. I've been involved in the budget. The school committee members are charged with reviewing and accepting and recommending the budget that's presented by the superintendent, which we did. We also had a school business manager unfortunately pass away, that we formed a hiring committee, a search committee, and I was on that committee. And we did hire a school business manager. His name is Brian Smith. He's from Babson College. He will be starting, I believe, don't quote me, I believe it's the end of April. I'm also on a negotiating committee for the custodians and IT unions. We're involved in that. The unions contract are up at the end of June of 2016, so we're trying to be proactive with all the unions to get them all settled and set up for the following year, 2017 through 2020. And I also, obviously, the day-to-day, the week-to-week school committee meetings, you pay attention, you do your homework, and you try to make educated and sound decisions.
What would be the making a pitch to the voters as to they've had a little bit of a taste, and to give you a 3-year term, what would be your pitch?
Well, the first pitch that I would probably put out there is I go back to the appointment. One of the questions that the Board of Selectmen and the school committee asked the 4 of us is, if we were appointed, would you then run for re-election? Whether or not they were, it was off the cuff, and I said absolutely yes, because why would I just do it for 5 months? I really want to, you just get started and you want to continue what you're doing, and that's the case in my case. We've got a school building, a new high school coming up that is a potential, and I'm so excited about it. I love the plan, I love the planning and the thought that went into it, and it's just going to be huge, not only for the children and the teachers, but for the town, because it will be a new beginning for Stoughton. It'll bring people in here whether they believe it or not or even think about that. It will help their property values. It helps the whole town. As far as the other 3 members that were applying for it, there were a couple that said they wouldn't run for re-election, that they were considering, to help out for the interim, but that they hadn't wanted to re-elect. So I committed to run for re-election, and I am, and I really enjoy it. I like the interaction. I'm used to, obviously, the school circumstances, and with town meeting, it gives me the financial backbone or reliability that I know what's going on in town meeting. I know the budget constraints, and I know a little bit about that side of it.
Well, going back to, you mentioned the high school building project, and if elected in April, the town meeting will be voting on the project, and then after that, the residents of the town will be voting to approve an override in the spring. So that being said, how would you make the case to the voter, or in particularly a skeptical voter, that this project is the right one for the town of Stoughton?
Well, personally, I believe, and right now both my kids are out of the school, so I could say I don't have skin in the game as far as the school are concerned, but yet I do, because I'm a resident of Stoughton. Anyone who is a resident of Stoughton has skin in the game. The school isn't just for the school system, it's for the town. We need a new school. We could lose accreditation. They've gone through a year's study, and I don't know if your viewers have followed the school building committee and their planning, but it is very, very detailed and in-depth. They're required by the MASB, which is the Massachusetts Association of School Buildings, to jump through all these hoops, so to speak, to make sure that everything is thought out and planned and spec'd and costed to the nth degree, which it was. It's, like I said, it's not just for the schools, it's for the town. They've done studies, they've done costing. One of the costing things that stuck out in my mind was, yes, they're going to have to do a debt exclusion, not a debt override, because there's a difference. An override is a permanent tax increase, whereas a debt exclusion, which is what would be going onto the ballot if it passes town meeting, is a 20-year, for lack of a better term, bond rating. The taxes would increase for 20 years based on your evaluation of your house. For example, they did a study, part of the school building committee's research. If an average evaluation in Stoughton was $200,000 for a person's house, for that person's portion of the tax increase to fund this $70+ million maximum
And
portion.
that's what the town would be.
That's what the town would be responsible
Right.
for at a maximum. It could be less, but that they're going for the worst case scenario, so just so everyone's prepared. Would be $372, I believe, which is a little more than $1 a day, and it lasts for 20 years. But at the same time, you get $120 some odd million school.
Still
out of it.
costly though for people who
is.
are struggling to make ends meet or on fixed incomes.
Yes.
A lot of the residents in the community don't have children going to the schools anymore and might be, living off a Social Security check.
Mm-hmm.
And so that could be, that still is a significant chunk of money.
Correct.
To be asking anybody to pay. Are there parts of the project that you find might be tougher sells than others or easier sells? There's the auditorium factor right now.
Correct.
That they're debating the size of the
Right.
auditorium and if the MSBA will allow a auditorium to be at the current size or if it will have to be smaller. What are some key factors of this project that you would really point to educationally?
Educationally, I strongly believe that it has to be, as far as size-wise, the facilities that we have. For example, you said the auditorium. It should be at least what we had, rather than, to me, it's going backwards if it goes smaller. I understand they have their rules and regulations and footprints, for lack of a better term. But the auditorium in the high school is not just used by the high school. It's used for many other, nonprofit organizations in town, out of town, and they charge a revenue for that. So it is a source of revenue. I'm sure that I haven't looked into it myself personally, but I'm sure that they can look at the fields, for example. Those are an additional cost. They're not part of the reimbursement cost. So they're talking AstroTurf, they're talking regular turf. Those are items that we can look at the prices for and see, do we want to really go AstroTurf? Do we have to? I don't think we have to. Yeah, it'd be beautiful and it'd be nice. But there's give and takes, and there is area, the superintendent's offices, which are not going to be included in the actual school building itself, but are part of the price tag. They've decided they want it separate, and therefore, since we have to pay for it anyway, it's not included in the original school building. Where are we going to put it? Can we put it in another town existing building? I mean, there's a lot of, I'm not going to say a lot of wiggle room, but there is wiggle room as far as that, and like I said, the maximum price tag would have been the $70+ million. So, and the Board of Selectmen and the town also, I would assume, could have a case-by-case basis for hardship cases. It is like any other tax. So I'm just putting that. I'm thinking off the top of my head. So don't hold me to it.
So this high school building, of course, is not the only building that the schools are looking at. Actually, as we film here, looking at the next school committee agenda, there's a statement of interest for the South Elementary School, which brings me to my next question, which is not necessarily directly related to the school itself, but if you look at your town meeting warrant, there is a proposed article that would transfer the property behind the South School, which is known as the Line and Lumber property off of Park Street, from the school committee jurisdiction to the Board of Selectmen, which would be town control. And that would be used for a potential public safety building, a joint building with the police and fire. I just wanted to get your thoughts about that, as the schools has also been looking at that land for a potential South Elementary School, a new building there. So again, just to kind of give me your thoughts of this issue, which could be a big one at town meeting.
Well, to me, timing is everything. And I'm a strong supporter of a new fire and safety building. We obviously have the need for that too. All you have to do is take a look at the old station number 1. As far as the location and this coming town meeting, again, timing is everything. And with the two things separately or happening at the same time. The statement of interest for the South School was planned to go through. We do need a new South School or renovation or whatever the MASB comes up with. Well, they'll go through the same process that we've gone through for this high school. The article to give the parcels of land from the school domain to the town domain, for lack of a better term, it's on the deed that it's supposed to be used for school purposes. It's not necessarily that we own it, just like the town doesn't own it. It's just on the deed. It's deeded that way. I wouldn't have a problem if that would happen if we have gone through a certain portion of the discovery that, yes, we can build a new South School on the existing land that we have South School on. If we don't need that land to build a new South School on, then so timing is everything. We need to find out if we were going to build a whole brand new South School, if we have the existing land, if that could be done, just like we're doing on the high school. We're building
is there a way to do this between now and
I
May?
don't know. I would doubt it. But that's my feelings, in that if we could just separate it, a little bit of time in between, we can't. I don't think the right decision can be made at the same time, if that puts it in a nutshell. But that would be my thought, is that we need to find out where we can put a new South School, in case that's what we have to do, is build a new one.
But it sounds like you're flexible with just looking into finding a solution.
Absolutely. It's just the timing.
Right.
I don't think we can say yes or no. It's not an absolute. There's things that have to happen before the decision can be made.
Now, with looking at these buildings, and they're not going to come out of the general budget, obviously, but still the school budget is north of $40 million. And
44.
Right, and it's still a significant chunk of the overall spending in town. How do you kind of keep that in mind going, if elected over the next 3 years, that if the vote for the high school building passes and there's an increase in taxes to be paying for the building, kind of keeping the school budget restraint into the point where, it's not increasing at such a level that taxes need to be increased even more.
Well, I'm not sure if you saw the school budget that we submitted for 2017, but Dr. Rizzi is very cognizant of the fact that we're putting a burden or potential burden onto the town and townspeople. In the past years, as a town meeting member, we've seen 4.2, 3.9, 4.4% increases in the school budget, which 80% of the budget is salaries. That's not just salaries for superintendents, and that it's all the salaries. I believe there's 600 employees total, town total, or school total. That's a lot of people, and those are almost all contractual. I think everybody is now in a union. Even the IT people came onto a union. So, having said that, this year's budget that we presented for 2017 was 2.57% increase. So she is very cognizant of the fact that the town's going to be spending big bucks, and everybody's going to be responsible to pay. And so I would assume that it would go forward this very similar to keep those budgets as low as possible.
That being said, what would you like to see done? Just kind of some goals over the next 3 years of something that you'd like to see added or expanded upon. That the school system is currently either doing or you'd like to see done.
Well, I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, and that would be the new high school building, especially because I've seen so much potential just from the proposed building.
But more from like a budget, just something like you could, a position, a program, something like that.
Well, also we have to deal with all the mandated programs that are in existence and will continue to be in existence. And it's not just special education. I went to a CPAC meeting last week and was very informative because I hadn't been exposed to that, and it's very interesting. And I really strongly suggest anyone who's heard about special education, either the programs or the costs or the students or the teachers that are involved. It's amazing. I really learned a lot in the short 2 hours that I was there. But in addition to the programming that we have now, obviously, we start. If I were king, I've always said foreign languages in the elementary level, computer for age-appropriate computer teaching, whether it's keyboarding or how to get around on the internet at the elementary level. Now, by the time kids get to middle school, even high school, they're all either on their little gadgets or they're on the computer or they're surfing the net, and they kind of know what they do. But if you ever watch them, and even my husband, I took typing in high school, so they don't know how to type, and maybe with the thumbs they don't need it so much, but it really does help. It just broadens it and it makes it more cognizant. I love the fact that they have an A+ certification course in the high school now. I got my A+ certification, which you can build your own computer on my own after at night after work. But it opens up a whole new pathway for a lot of kids who are into IT. Or I heard talk that they're considering or wondering if the SMAC studios would be able to be fit into the new high school like that.
Which they're not. Going forward.
Because teaching that would be just another pathway. So the opportunities are endless, and obviously budgets are always going to be our constraint. So
right, and looking at moving on from goals and priorities to more the committee itself and the inner workings of it. What's been kind of the experience so far with, it seems like the boards go back and forth, and it's not just the school committee, it can be the selectmen too. There's rifts among members, or it's just meetings can be contentious. Doesn't seem to be the case with the school committee over the last few months. What's your take on the school committee and the way it's currently, the meetings currently go, the way the committee operates?
Well, anytime you put more than two people together in a room, you're going to have a difference of opinions. You're going to have a difference of interpretation of either rules or procedures or policies. Excuse me. And it's the committee's purpose and members' responsibility to get along. It doesn't mean that you have to like everybody. It's just like at work. You have to work. You have to be professional. And that's what I really strive to do. I'm usually very, very quiet. However, I can be very, very passionate about something that moves me. For example, the high school. It's contained, but it's in me. It's very passionate, and kudos to everyone who has a passion for whatever they're expressing at the time. The chairman has the responsibility to herd those cats, so to speak, to keep them not necessarily in line, but to within the boundaries of the rules that are set for the procedure. Personalities should not be involved in it, and unfortunately, human nature, they do get involved, but that's when it can be just brought to attention. We're not allowed, town meeting, you're not supposed to say, Mr. Smith, I didn't like that. You're supposed to say to the previous speaker, just so you can all be on the same page. And that's what I would always keep in my mind, and I try to.
When it seems that sometimes, when there's lots of 5-0 votes or 4-1 votes, rumblings start, the rubber stamping, what the superintendent wants, or rubber stamping what person X wants. Is there validity to that mindset of, the current school committee is just rubber stamping?
I don't think so. We're 5 different people up there. We don't have, meetings behind closed doors with Dr. Rizzi. There's not a plan or a plot to get this program or that program, or to, exclude this person or that person. We have a job to do, and it's defined, by Massachusetts law, Chapter 70, Section 37, that we hire and terminate and evaluate the superintendent. We are required to review and recommend the budget submitted by the superintendent, and we are also required to set goals and policies and procedures in accordance with Massachusetts education laws. That being said, again, personalities do come into it. Dr. Rizzi has a doctorate in education. She has a lot more experience in building curriculum. She has a great staff that contributes. It's not just one person. There's an administrative staff, and they all put their, every year for the budgets, for example, they come together and they start months ahead of time, and they put their wish list together. If money was no object, what would you like? And they know they have to whittle it down to what is reasonable and what is responsible and what fits in Stoughton and what fits, to go forward from here. So I wouldn't say that we're rubber stamping. At some point, you have to trust the people that the town have hired, whether it be the school superintendent, the school business manager, the town accountant, who then, the bills that come through us. At some point, you have to trust them. We have budgets, we have to adhere to them, and everybody does their job.
Now, switching gears to another popular topic that people like to debate is testing. Oh. And so with various forms of standardized tests, whether it be MCAS or PARCC or the SATs, at the high school level, what's your take on testing and its role in education and Stoughton's performance on these tests, depending on what test it is? It's middle of the road to, in the average ballpark. So again, what's your take?
Well, unfortunately, I was not a good test taker. Everybody has either some you're great or you don't mind, and it wasn't that I froze, but it was just a matter of doubt, self-doubt, and I think that comes down to a lot of kids too. The testing themselves, the SATs, they've been around for years, and I don't think they're going anywhere. It's one tool that universities and colleges use to evaluate a student. The PARCC test, unfortunately, I am not real familiar with, so I won't speak to that. MCAS. My kids both went through schools and the Stoughton schools and had to take the MCAS. And there was, as much as the teachers and faculty may try not to stress the kids out about it, the kids feel it. And of course the parents feel it because the parents know it. So it's kind of a, don't talk about it, but talk about it. Don't do this, but study hard. And don't worry about it, but do your best. So my one feeling, if I could say anything, was that I don't want to lose some other education topics when they feel they have to teach to the test. Because to me, then they're not getting a full rounded education. And I think in the beginning when the MCAS first came around, they were definitely, because nobody knew what to teach toward it, so they definitely started, well, let's take the test. This is what they have to know, so let's teach it, which is kind of a normal reaction. But as they realize, well, wait a minute, well, what about the music, and what about the arts, and what about that? So you have to have a rounded education, and it's going to come down to the individual student. you know, if a student is a good student, they'll be a good student no matter what test is thrown at them. And that doesn't start from, you know, in 10th grade. That starts back at home. And it's up to the parents and the siblings, and you know, it takes a village to raise a child. So that's where the students come out of it. You know, I worked really hard with my kids with the little time that I may or may not have had to work with them, and the parents set the example.
Now, mentioning parents, you got your start, you said, you know, volunteering in town with, you know, in the PTO. The school has made an effort over the last few years with, you know, parent engagement. Mm-hmm. How do you feel that's going, and, you know, what can be done to get even more parents involved?
I think it needs to be more of an outreach from the schools, and in conjunction with the PTO, in conjunction with word of mouth, in conjunction with...
I mean, do you feel parents are better informed now?
I think so. I think so. And I think it's going to continue to be the way it was even when my kids were in elementary school. In elementary school, the kids come home with a backpack full of papers because little kids can't remember everything. They don't have the iPads. They don't have the texting that until they get older. So the papers come home.
Well, hopefully
not.
Yeah.
And then, well, they might have. And as they go into middle school, less papers come home and more is put onto the internet or onto the website, and it's either the parent's responsibility or the student saying, oh, you're supposed to go look at this, or you're supposed to log on here. So even though technology helps us, it still is only as good as the user. So the user has to use it. So there has to be more education for the parents on where to look for it. As their students progress through the grades, more of the responsibility shifts to the parents to be their own advocate, to get involved. It's like going to the doctors. These days, you have to tell the doctor everything that's wrong so that the doctor will know how to diagnose you. If you don't tell him, he won't know. So if the parent doesn't get actively involved with their student, and through high school, through 12th grade, even though they don't want to be in the same room with you by then, but you need to be involved at all stages of your child's education.
So just about a minute left, some quick, I know, the half hour goes by quickly, quick rapid fire questions, 1 or 2 word answers. Okay. Favorite place to eat in Stoughton?
Town Spa.
Favorite music to listen to, type of music, or, you know, what's on your iPod?
I have 2, rock and roll and disco.
What would be a strength, a personal strength?
A personal strength. Well, I'm a very strong physically person. I've gone back to the gym, and personal strength is I'm very, very patient.
A weakness, for lack of a better term.
A weakness, my eyes. I can't see very well.
And what would you want if you had an interaction with a voter? What would you want that voter to take away?
I would hope that they would ask me anything they wanted to ask, and I would try to answer it, and if I didn't know the answer, I'd find out.
And lastly, Stoughton. What about this community makes it special?
I love Stoughton because it is such a small town mentality and location, but it's only 25 miles from Boston, and the people here, there's a great diversity. They're very friendly.
Great. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for tuning in. I'm Jeffrey Pickette. This has been Stoughton Spotlight, Conversations with the Candidates. I encourage you to go to the polls on Tuesday, April 5th, and vote in the 2016 Stoughton Town election. And I also encourage you to take a look at the other interviews we've done with the other candidates running this year. Thanks again for tuning in.